welcome everyone. For me, this is an evening, 5 p.m. I'm joining from Budapest, Hungary. And basically, the talk that I have chosen, or the topic that I have chosen for this for the today's session, is how to write better BDD scenarios and what kind of small tricks and practices could be applied if you would like to reach this goal. Just a few words about myself. You have heard from Larry that I'm most known by creating SpecFlow. SpecFlow is basically the .NET port of Cucumber, or the .NET variation of Cucumber that I did now it's almost 13 years ago. And since then, I was dealing with behavior-driven development. I was working as a BDD coach, or I am working as a BDD coach and BDD trainer since then. And I did quite many projects, on-site projects, so keep my hands dirty with coding and participating in the project-related activities where we were doing BDD. And obviously there I have seen many interesting challenges. Some of them we were able to solve. There were some that we were not able to solve at that time, but we have figured out how to do that better for the next one. And basically this talk and just my other activities that I do in the BDD space, like my talks, my trainings, and the coaching that I do is based on that experience. And I'm keep trying to be in the practical side as well. So I also have some side projects, and I'm also active in the open source community, so that I keep the practical details. Basically, two resources that I was contributing to that might be interesting for you if you are interested in behavior-driven development. The first one is a newsletter. The newsletter is called BDD Addict, and you can find it at the bddaddict.com URL. This is absolutely free thing, and basically the newsletter is a compilation of interesting articles and news that I have read in a particular month about BDD. So it's not necessarily my comment, even though that I'm providing a small teaser for every single article. If you are interested to see some selected articles, blog posts that are really good and deal with this topic, feel free to subscribe. Or if you go to bddaddict.com, then you can also see the past issues as well. So that's one thing that I can recommend. And the other thing that it's a great project that we started with Seb Rose. We wanted to make, or we are doing a book series about BDD. We have two books ready. The first one is called Discovery. This is related to the requirement management part of BDD, and the other is Formulation. And we are working on the third book. If you are interested to read about these topics in a book style, feel free to go to bddbooks.com, and you will see all the links to the different channels, how you can buy. The Discovery book is also available as an audio book. And the latest news was that now we have also a Japanese translation. So if someone joining from Japan and would like to read about the Discovery in your own language, now you can do that. So that's about myself. And when to get into the topic that I planned for today, just compiled a quick agenda. So these are the topics that I would like to talk about today. Maybe not everyone is aware of what behavior-driven development, or BDD in short, is. So I thought that I would start with a kind of 5-minute BDD summary. Let's see whether don't do the stopwatch. Maybe I will miss that, but a short BDD summary. Let's say it like that. And then I would like to talk about this term formulation, which is about writing BDD scenario. What the BDD scenarios? What does that really means, and how should we imagine that? And then we will talk about some practical details of how good BDD scenarios might look like, and there we will see the so-called brief principles. You will see by the end of the talk what this keyword means in this particular context. And after the wrap up, I hope that I will have some time also for Q&A. So if you will have some questions, then please just write them into the chat, or what is the right format for that. And then at the end of the talk, I will try to answer as many of them as possible. So that's the plan, and I hope you are ready so that we can move forward. So as I said, the first thing that I would like to start with is a kind of short BDD summary, and maybe many of you have heard about behavior-driven development, even if you haven't really used that yet. And typically, when people are asked about BDD, the first thing that came to their mind, and this is absolutely fine, is a BDD scenario. A BDD scenario that uses the given, when, and then keywords and some additional things. And basically, that, for example, the one that you see on the screen, I think a BDD scenario is one of the central elements of BDD itself. But I would like to see a little bit behind that, and we'll come back to that a little bit later as well, why I do that, and try to see what is a BDD scenario is doing, and what is our goal with BDD, and why BDD scenarios might be useful. For that, I would like to use a metaphor of a bridge. This wasn't my idea. Actually, Gojko Edžić had a great book called Bridging the Communication Gap quite many years ago. And that's the metaphor that he was using. And that's what I also would like to use. So I would like to see show you the scenarios, the BDD scenarios, as some sort of bridge that bridges the two sides of what? That's the question. So what is on the two sides of this bridge? We can say that on one side of the bridge, there are the requirements. Of course, we are in a software development process. The requirements are coming in some form from the business. So that's on one side of the bridge. And on the other side, there is the application that we would like to that we need to implement the solution for that particular problem. So we can say that the problem and the solution, or the requirement and the created application, is at the two sides of that bridge. And somehow the scenarios are sitting in the middle. But why do we need to bridge these two things? Why is there a gap between these two different elements? And what does making a bridge between these two really mean? And of course, there could be multiple different answers, but maybe the two most important motivation for making this bridge might be that from the requirement side, so from the business perspective, what we would like to achieve, that we would like to make the requirements testable. So we would like to have a requirement coverage. We would like to make sure that the test that the team is doing is really testing the requirements and not just the code. And on the other side, from the delivery side, we could make the wish or the desire that we would like to make our tests better understandable. In a typical project, the tests are created in your programming language, and especially if they are more complex system or integration tests, sometimes they are really hard to understand, and making them understandable is a valid goal. So, and well, actually, these two things are the two main motivation from the two sides that ends up for the need of a BDD scenario and making a bridge between these two. If we are considering, or if you consider a BDD scenario, then I'm pretty sure that most of you would think that a BDD scenario is basically an automated test. And this is true. So BDD scenario is a different form of a test. But it looks like that if you just think of the BDD scenarios as a form of an automated test, you will see that there are plenty of other tools that you could use to express a test that might perform better than doing the BDD scenarios and in using Cucumber or SpecFlow to be able to automate them. So if only the automated testing would be the purpose for these scenarios, then probably you would be able to find better tools than that. So actually, the reason why still it makes sense to use BDD scenarios, because those scenarios are solving multiple purposes, and having an automated or being an automated test is just one purpose. But there are two others as well. On one hand, the BDD scenarios are also, we usually say that they are illustrating the requirements, or they are the illustration of the requirements. What does that mean? That by reading the scenario, you can have a better picture what the requirements really were, and that's how they can build some useful information on that. And on the other hand, the BDD scenarios can also serve as a documentation of the behavior, especially in agile projects where where the documentation had to be reconsidered, or maybe not the classic documentation forms are existing, or they don't make that much sense. But we still need to need some sort of documentation of preserving what we agreed to and preserving what we have achieved for that. So that's the three purposes that that the BDD scenario is basically solving. It's an illustration for a requirement, it's an automated test, and it's a documentation of the behavior. Of course, you don't need all three purposes at the same time. So typically in the implementation phase, when you are creating your new functionality, you are more interested in having the scenario as an illustration of the requirement, because this is how we learn about the requirements, and having an automated test to verify whether we really reach that. And maybe on the maintenance phase, these scenarios will become part of the regression tests, and then that they are automated tests and they have documented the behavior. That becomes more important. But altogether, all three are so to say equally important. What you can see from that, and I hope that you already start feeling that definitely testing is an important aspect of BDD, and it's an important aspect of the scenarios, but they are more. BDD is not only testing. If you just consider the testing aspect, then probably you would find better tools for that. So basically, that's the central element, the concept for a BDD scenario. So if you would really like to, at the end, define what behavior-driven development is, then, I mean, there are multiple definitions out there that you could choose from, but that's probably the simplest one. So we could say that behavior-driven development is about understanding, documenting, and verifying the business requirements through illustrative scenarios. So basically, that says that BDD primarily targeting on the business requirements, the functional requirements. And what we would like to do with the functional requirements, we would like to have a better understanding of them. We would like to document how we understood them. And of course, we would like to verify whether our solution is really fulfilling those requirements or not. And as we said, these scenarios, these illustrative scenarios, will be the central elements of that to be able to achieve that. When you put this into practice, so when a team starts to adapt or adapted the BDD method, then at the end you will see that you will need to do three different kind of practices, three different kind of activities to be able to achieve that. The first activity is related to the understandability of the requirements. That's what in BDD we usually call the discovery process. So discovery process would be just that how we are building up the shared understanding by collaborating on the requirements and having some structured conversations on that. Once we have these conversations, once we were discussing about the requirements, that's the time where we would need to really write them down into scenarios. That's what usually called the formulation practice. Basically, when we are just documenting the results as scenarios. This is going to be the topic of the today's talk. And of course, once we have the scenarios, we would like to automate them so that we can verify whether our system is really fulfilling those or not. So that's basically the three key practices of BDD: discovery, formulation, automation. And as I said, today we are going to focus on the formulation practice. So, I mean, in a high level, we already mentioned what formulation is. We were basically saying that formulation is some sort of activity when we document the domain examples as BDD scenarios using this magical give and then keywords. But whenever you try to do it in practice, you will see that as easy it sounds, oh, well, I just need to write down the requirements. There are some tricks and pitfalls to avoid, and therefore it makes sense to dig into that a little bit more in detail. And I don't know how many of you are actually testers here, but many of the BDD practitioners, or sometimes the movement to turn into BDD comes from the QA side, and many testers are involved in this process, which is generally very good. But therefore, I found it important to to make a contrast, what is the difference between this formulation BDD activity as we defined earlier with the classic test writing or test design that usually the testers are doing. And this is not a better or worse thing. These are just differences. So there is no both of them are important activities, but they are somehow different. So I just listed a few key points that you might want to do when you do test design and test writing, and what kind of things you are focusing on when you do formulation. So definitely when you do a classic test design or test writing, then what you need to do, you need to analyze the business requirements to be able to see what kind of tests you would like to define. You probably will do some magical testing things as well, like defining the equivalence group of input and any other testing techniques. You are maybe go ahead and try to find some edge cases, some special situations. Probably you will need to deal a lot with test data. You will need to gather required test data, and at the end, you will need to write the test script itself in the form of your testing tool. Maybe this will be really a script language. Maybe it will be just several lines in an Excel sheet, whatever your tool is supporting. On the other hand, when we do formulation, formulation is somewhat different. Typically, at the time when we are doing formulation, then business rules, so generally the requirements, have been already discovered or discussed through the discovery session. You remember we have discovery, formulation, automation, and now we are at the second stage already. So we don't really need to do detailed business requirement analysis, because that has been already done during the discovery session. And on the discovery session, we have identified some sort of key examples. I will show a few examples for that so that you can see. So anyway, that kind of work have been already done. So what we really need to do is that what we collected as a rough examples or notes in the discovery session, you need to put them into properly written formal way, so that that tools like Cucumber and SpecFlow can use that, and that it works as a long-term documentation. So obviously we will need to review the wording and many other things. So these are the key differences, and from that you see that these are quite different things. So typically formulation is absolutely different than classic test writing or test design would look like. So again, I was trying to collect some of the typical activities that you do during formulation. So what kind of things you are usually do. And again, just remember that this is all about documentation and not automation. So, for example, you are identifying context, action, and outcome. So identifying what is a given, what is a when, and what is a then. So maybe in a discussion during formulation, you get to you get to that sentence that, oh, is this preparation step is really important, or to be able to get the expected outcome, or we just or actually the expected outcome would be also valid without that. So questioning some of the preparation steps, that's very typical in a formulation session. Sometimes we just review or fix business terminology that are used. Maybe during the discovery session we used client and user randomly. Now we would need to finalize how we are actually calling these things. Obviously, we would need to turn these scenarios into proper English sentences. So maybe just word ordering, grammar, tenses, whatever else. So maybe in a discussion, you would say that, oh, actually, this thing has happened earlier. So maybe we should use a past tense to emphasize that was something earlier happening in the process of execution. You might want to reuse phrasing styles from other scenarios or even complete steps. So maybe in a discussion you say that, oh, I remember that we have already described a similar problem. Let's look at that. Let's see how we expressed it on that feature, and maybe we can reuse that here as well. So that's absolutely a usual kind of discussion during a formulation session. And maybe just the last one. So we also might want to make sure that these steps that we have listed make a logical sequential flow, that this and this and this happens after that. So that kind of discussions can also happen. So the result of this formulation session, and as I said, these were some typical things that you might see in a formulation discussion. The result of them is a BDD scenario, and I think typically the BDD scenarios are very self-explanatory, and I don't want to go into the details of the syntax. But what you can see is that typically a scenario is consisting of a name or title that's identifying the scenarios. It can have multiple given steps which are describing the context. Sometimes if we have multiple given steps, just to make the readability nicer, we can use the end keyword, just the continuation of the previous step. So in this case, this scenario actually have two given steps, one when and one when step. The when step, which is really initiating the behavior or just performing the action that is triggering the outcome, and then steps which are describing the expected outcome. We will talk about that later as well, but we would like to have these scenarios focused, and therefore good BDD scenarios have only one when step. That might be surprising for you because maybe your scenarios have multiple when steps. We will come back to that a little bit later, or we can continue this discussion on that in the Q&A. But at the end, if you follow the general practices and guidelines, then this is what you should see. The keywords right now, we are seeing them in English, but obviously as they are describing the business intention, the business requirements, they should be in the language what the business is really using. So if you are working, let's say in a German domain, then obviously you would write your scenarios with the German language, or if you would be in Hungarian, then definitely you could use the Hungarian or keywords for that. So it's supporting more than 70 different languages. So definitely you will find yours within that. The scenarios that you have, or the scenario that you have seen, are formed in a format which is called the Gherkin syntax. It's a little bit silly name, but yeah, that's how it is. Basically, the Gherkin syntax is what defines these keywords, like the given, when, then keyword, the scenario keywords, and many others. So basically, this is describing a business-readable specification language using these keywords. And actually, it was developed as part of the Cucumber project, but then promoted to a kind of tool-agnostic format. And now there are many different tools that are able to understand the Gherkin syntax, and you are able to use that. And generally, which is again sounds to be a little bit weird if you are only seeing it as a testing platform, but it's on purpose simple. So it's lacks of programming constructs like conditions, variables, loops, whatsoever. And that is on purpose because we would like to keep the specification, keep the requirements somewhat clean. Okay, so this is a little bit complex picture that is describing the flow, how you are understanding the requirements, how you finally turn them into a user story. I don't want to go too much into the details of that because part of that is part of the discovery process. That is not the focus point of this talk today. But basically, the thing is that that whenever you are considering a new user story or story to be implemented, then what you are typically doing, you are just listing all those acceptance criteria. In BDD, we call these things rules, just a nicer word for the same thing. So you are describing the rules that the user story should fulfill. And during the discovery session, basically, you are just coming up a couple of examples that are just describing how that particular rule is actually performed. And then we are doing the formulation, and this is what I said earlier, that it basically just takes the existing knowledge that we have gathered during the discovery session. What we are basically doing, we are taking these examples and just turning them into properly written BDD scenarios. So that's the formulation session. And once the scenarios are formulated, we can go ahead and start coding the rule, implementing the rule in the production system, in a way that at the end, the scenario will document how we understood the rule. And the scenario can also, if it's automated, can also verify whether what we have coded down is really working as we expected. So basically, it just finally makes this connection between the two sides. It's not sitting on the solution side, it's not sitting on the problem side, but somewhere in the middle, and it just has the necessary call-out points for both sides. Again, I said that the discovery is not the major topic of this talk. This is an example. This is something called an example map. If you are interested to learn more about the discovery, then I really recommend you to Google for example mapping. That's a great technique. Basically, what you see here is you see that in an imagined user story of a Stack Overflow-like application, basically you see that we have identified 4 different rules. And for each rule, we were coming up with 1 or 2 examples. So that was the result of the discovery session. And now as we get to formulate, actually, I was just zooming into one of these examples. Maybe one of these examples would look like that. This is some suggestion related user story. Let's imagine that we have 2 questions in the system. What is SpecFlow? What is Cucumber? If you start asking best SpecFlow practices, then we should suggest the first one, what is SpecFlow. That's the concrete example. As you can see, this is a very simple thing. It doesn't have to be complex because we have multiple such examples, and they all together help you to imagine how the application would look like. And in the formulation session, this is what we take. This is the input for the formulation session, and this is what we turn into a more proper BDD scenario. As you can see, now I have done the scenario for this particular example. And if you're just scanning through the scenario, another question contains the same word. Given there are questions asked as what is SpecFlow, what is Cucumber, and the user is authenticated, when the user starts asking the question, what is the best SpecFlow practices, then the suggestion list should be what is SpecFlow. As you can see, the meaning of the 2 things is really the same. So actually, we just used the knowledge that we have discovered during the discovery session, but now we have turned it into a format that is first of all nicely written, or at least more nicely written, and something that Cucumber or SpecFlow can pick up and process. So that's how you can see a concrete example of how such formulation activity is done. I would like to highlight, because this is going to be important for us later on, but that the example that we were considering were an example of a particular rule, and not just an example generally for the user story. And documenting that rule is also super important. In the earlier versions of Gherkin, there was no easy way or no structured way to document the rule. But now, in the modern versions of Cucumber and SpecFlow, basically there is a new rule keyword. That's what you see here on the top of my scenario, where you can document what was the rule that this scenario was belonging to, and definitely it makes sense to document that one, because together with the rule, the thing is much better understandable, or it's going to work much better as a documentation than without that. Then we would need to just basically reverse engineer what the scenario wanted to really specify. So that's basically the core understanding of what formulation is. So basically what we have seen so far is that we would like to document these examples using the given when then keyword, that we are using the Gherkin format that defines these keywords in multiple different languages. And it's an important detail that these business rules, or the acceptance criteria, if you better like to call it like that, should be also documented together with the scenarios. Okay, so that's what we have seen so far. Now, after we have seen some summary of formulation, I would like to, this is going to be the rest of the talk, I would like to introduce you to these magical brief principles, which are essentially some sort of golden rules of formulation. So rules that or principles that BDD practitioners have been collecting in the last years, and which are really important and really make sense to follow. And I could of course drop out the definition of the brief principles and see what do they mean. But what I would like to do, I would like to show you how the brief principles work through a concrete example. And in this case, the concrete example will be to fix an existing badly written scenario. And you will see then the difference, how the things will look like if you are applying the principles or not. So hopefully that way it will be easier to understand what they really mean. And when I would like to fix a BDD scenario, then I would like to again refer that in many cases the BDD initiative comes from the QA department, and the QA people or the testers already have many test cases typically at the time when they introduce BDD. And for the first look, it would be a good idea to just take the existing test cases and simply port them to BDD scenarios. But unfortunately, this is in many of the cases, this is not a working strategy. And I would like to first highlight why this is not, what are the problems with this kind of approach. And to be able to understand the problem, let's just quickly compare the BDD scenarios versus the manual regression test, or BDD versus manual regression testing. Obviously, there are similarities, but also there are key differences as well that make this typical translation of manual test cases to scenarios almost impossible. So let's start with the similarities, because I think that's how the motivation really starts. So typically, both of them are targeting the functional quality. So they are both describing how the system should behave and trying to verify that. Both way of testing is some sort of prescribed way of testing, so scripted. So you upfront decide what you want to check, and this is what you will execute at the end. So both of them are really working like that, and both of them can be used to catch regression issues. I think in long term, that's the main purpose of both kind of testing, and for both, you will need to perform multiple different actions on the system on the test to be able to verify whether it works correctly or incorrectly. However, there are unfortunately also some key differences as well. And the key differences can be probably the best seen from the costing and from the verification point of view. So I don't know if you were ever thinking about the cost factors of the different kinds of tests, but if you would do, then you would see that for manual tests, typically the highest cost factor is the human execution cost, that somebody needs to sit down and they need to redo that test multiple times, basically every time when we would like to make a regression verification. On the other hand, for automated tests, the execution time is not free, because of course you have to reserve a server and whatever, but that definitely this is not the highest cost factor. The highest cost factor is to implement that kind of automated test and maintain those tests. Probably the maintenance is even more important than the implementation itself. The verification options are also very different. For manual tests, typically a human that is doing some activities is good for checking as many things as they see. So if I'm just going through a user journey, I can check at least 50 different things while I was doing that without even noticing that. On the other hand, automated BDD tests are basically only good for checking only one thing. Actually, if it finds a problem, then it anyway stops in the majority of the cases. So that's these are the core differences, so that the cost factors are different and the verifications options are different. And basically, as a consequence of these two key differences, is that at the end, the testing flow will be different. So for manual tests, typically you need to have a longer user journey that the manual tester can go through and check many things. While for automated BDD scenarios or BDD automated testing in general, it might make sense to have multiple smaller focused tests that are only checking a particular business rule. and have many of them. So because of these differences, typically that transcribing a manual test into a scenario is typically not a good idea. And this is how my example scenario was actually born. Hopefully you are not able to read that because it's too small font. And anyway, my insurance doesn't cover any kind of injuries caused by seeing very bad scenarios, so don't look at that in detail. But definitely what you can see that this is a long test script. It looks like that it is a scenario because it uses the give and then keywords, but definitely this is not a BDD scenario. It's just basically a test script written using the BDD keywords. That's what we can say. Again, our goal is to document the requirements and get feedback from them, from the business, whether they are happy with those requirements or if there is any change, how much they are contradicting. And therefore, unfortunately, this kind of test scripts are not really helping with that. So that's not a good approach. But let's try to fix this. Let's try to fix this very ugly scenario. And by fixing, we can learn about the brief principles. And now this is the first time when I can finally show what these brief principles really mean. So this is a mnemonic which is basically taken from the initials of the five principle, and actually briefness is the sixth one. That makes sense. So B stands for business language, R stands for real data, I stands for intention revealing, E stands for essential, and F stands for focused. And basically what I would like to do, I would like to go through this scenario, this long scenario, and always take one particular principle, not exactly in this order, and try to fix that particular aspect of that. And by that, you will learn what that really means. Let's start with the first one, the business language. So basically, whenever we would like to rewrite or consider this for the business language, we can look at the sentences. And unfortunately, the language that this scenario is currently using is not business language. Navigating to your URL, waiting for some time, or clicking on a button, that's browser interaction. That's not the language that our business is really talking. And if you would like to rephrase this thing to the business language, unfortunately, we have to make the hard work of analyzing this scenario and see and try to understand what we originally wanted to describe with these steps. So let's do a couple of steps like that. So maybe first I just highlighted the first two steps: navigate to this URL and wait until the home becomes visible. What we really wanted to say probably is that what happens when the user is checking, or when I check the home page. Okay, this was the way to describe that. We need to navigate to URL and wait until it's really loaded, but that's what we wanted to do. Then we have a then step. Then the browser title is this. So probably that whether it's a browser title or a mobile app title, that's not really important. But what we really wanted to say with that the title should be, doesn't matter whether it's a browser or whatever else, is the SpecFlow overflow home. We don't know really why this was important for us right now, but actually that's what we wanted to somehow verify. And then we can go further. I just highlighted these two lines, but actually there are a couple of more that I was skipping here. So you can imagine a proper login thing, which is actually just ensuring that you have logged in. And you can also then select this big section, which is, if you would go through that very much in detail, actually it's just going to the ask question page, just types in some question details and title, whatever text. So basically what it does, it is saying that when I ask the new question with test question 1, 2, 3 as a title, with some details as a body, and with some tags that you are seeing there. This is what we really wanted to do. And of course we could go through the rest of the scenario. I will stop here. Probably you started to get the point. So basically what we did now, we have rewritten the technical language into some business language to be able to better work with. So now what you see on the screen is the the fixed version, at least from this perspective. So right now the scenario has been fully refactored to use the business language. Of course, this is not ready yet, but at least we have applied already one principle, the business language principle. And as you can see, immediately the scenario got much shorter and probably easier to read already. But we will not stop here. We will move on with the next principle, with the focus principle. The focus principle really means is that that we would need to identify what kind of business rules this scenario is verifying. Because we said that ideally every scenario should only support one business rule. And maybe this one is supporting multiple, we don't know yet. But if we analyze that, and particularly where we analyze what kind of rules it is basically verifying, then we can look at the then steps. Typically, the then steps are the ones that are verifying the results. So typically, the then steps are the ones that are showing that that we are doing some sort of verification. And as you can see here, we have altogether 5 then steps, but we have 4 then step groups, so to say. So my first guess would be that actually probably this scenario is supporting 4 different business rules, and not a single one, which is not a good thing. So it looks like that this scenario is definitely not focused. For the first look, maybe it doesn't sound that bad that one scenario is supporting multiple business rules, but unfortunately, these multi-rule, multi-purpose scenarios are typically causing bottleneck in your development process. So don't want to go too much into the details. Maybe in the Q&A we can also come back to that. But no one will be able to take care. It will be very hard to put it into the right place. It will be very hard to find the ownership for those kind of scenarios. So they are really causing a lot of trouble also with the automation. So small and focused scenarios are definitely much better. So what can we do? So if our scenario is really supporting multiple verification of multiple business rules, then basically what we would need to do is we would need to split them into multiple smaller ones. So typically the process would be that we are just going through then group by then group. So maybe we can just start with the first one. The first one says that the title should be Spec Overflow Home. At this point, probably it will be very hard to remember why this was important for us. So probably you would need to go back to the product owner or the business analyst and ask them, okay, I see that we are verifying whether the title is this and this, but why was that important? What was the rule behind that we wanted to figure out? And hopefully, with a lot of sweat and tears, probably would realize that what we really wanted to verify with that is the application homepage should be identifiable. That's why we wanted to have this verification there. Maybe you have a better take. That could be one option. Again, now we could move on to the next one. The next one, as you see, is showing or verifying whether the homepage is somehow activated and the question that you just asked is appearing on that homepage. Probably the rule behind that was that new questions should be added to what we wanted to ensure. So now we have separated all the necessary things for that to be able to do and create a new scenario. The last one is when you are just going to the question details page and you see the question. Probably the rule behind was that the details of the question can be accessed from the question list. These are the steps that were required for that. So as part of this focus principle, what we did, we just split this big scenario into multiple smaller ones, and now every scenario is only verifying single business rule. Typically, they have a few then steps. Therefore, maybe you need to have 2 then steps to be able to express that, but definitely not much more. After the focus principle, we can think about the intention revealing principle. This concrete example is not that exciting for that, so there are not so much of intention revealing problems here. But I highlighted the 2 things that could be considered, especially the second one. So whenever you think about the intention revealing, you should always think about that you should not focusing on how you have achieved that, but you should rather phrase what you wanted to achieve. So instead of the mechanical steps, you should rather focus on the intention. And if you look at this, the this highlighted area on the lower scenario, you see that what we say is that we have logged in and we have added a question with, but actually what we really wanted to express is that that there is a question added with. So we don't care whether you logged in or you imported it or however it gets into the system. That's not important for us right now. The only important thing is that we have a question that is already in the system. So that's how we can more focus on the intention revealing thing. And given I have logged in, maybe what we really wanted to say with that there should be an authenticated user. One way of that would be to express it with a Gherkin tag. We don't necessarily even need a step for that. But again, we just highlighted what we really wanted to have. Okay, so so now we have applied the business language, the focus, and the intention revealing principle. But if you look at these scenarios, you will still see that there are a couple of unnecessary details in there. So if you think about this scenario, which is checking that new questions should be added to the question list, actually in this particular scenario, the question what the body and what the tags were are absolutely unimportant. They are not actually verified in the advanced tab. Doesn't matter what you write there, it will anyway work. So actually in this form, in the scenario, they are more causing just a noise than really help. Again, this might be a little bit contradicting if you were coming from the testing space, because generally we think that the more details mean more clarity, but it's rather the opposite. So unnecessary and unimportant or irrelevant details are usually causing more confusion, because people will ask that, okay, why was it important that it has that particular tag? Is it only working if I had a Gherkin tag on there, or does it work anyway? Yeah, fixing that is easy. Of course, you just need to remove these details from the scenario and put it down to the automation layer, where it can fill it with some useful default values if the particular field was mandatory. So now we have fixed that details, and now it's going to be looking nicer. The only remaining principle that we haven't seen is the real data. Here our scenarios we're anyway using real data in some way, so that's already pretty good. But we can still look at the data that we were using here. So for example, we can see that we were asking a test question 1, 2, 3, which is definitely a concrete data, but definitely not realistic data. Of course, it's a question of taste and a question of discussion. But typically, if you are using more realistic data, then it will be much easier to have some conversations on that. It will be much easier to imagine what kind of questions people are asking. That typically there is a question mark at the end, whatever else a question might have. Generally, we can say that a concrete piece of real data is very good for illustrating what we want, and of course how concrete it should be. That's always a question, but definitely this is something that makes sense to consider. So now we have applied all 5 principles, and actually what was dropping out at the end, we have created multiple scenarios, and as you can see, these scenarios are not only supporting these 5 principles, but they are also brief themselves. So it's much easier to understand them. It's much easier to ask the business for some review. It's much easier to discuss any details based on that. So now we have cleaned this scenario. So to wrap this up, basically what we have seen the use of the 6 brief principles, the 6 brief principles of good scenarios. We have seen that the business language, where we say that the business terminology is helping this cross-discipline collaboration, helps you to discuss with each about the requirements. We said that we would like to have real data, because again, this is helping to reveal assumptions, edge cases, whatsoever. We'd like to have intention revealing scenarios, so which are describing the expectation and not the mechanical steps, how we achieve that. We would like to have the essential details only and remove all the other noise that is not really important to illustrate the outcome. and we would like to have the scenarios focusing on a single business rule, so they should be focused. And at the end, having the scenarios brief, means shorter and easier to read, are definitely helpful because it is going to be easier to maintain at the end. Okay, so that were the 6 brief principles of good scenarios. I think we are just good in timing, so let's just wrap it up, and then we can open the Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to start preparing that. So basically, we have, as a wrap up, we can say that we have seen these 4 topics that we addressed in the today's session. So we have seen a brief summary about the BDD process. We were looking into the details about this formulation activity or this formulation process or practice looks like. We were highlighting that formulation is typically much different from test writing or test transcribing, and that's a very key difference. And not taking care of that difference is causing many of the problems in the BDD adaptation. And by fixing that bad BDD scenario, is basically helping us to learn about the brief principles. So the key facts that you should probably take home with you from that session are these. So that formulation is something which is used to document the examples and make them ready for automation. That scenario should be connected to business rules, and they should follow the brief principles: business language, real data, intentional revealing, essential, focused, and brief. So that was my presentation for today. Thank you very much. And we are opening up the QA session. Before doing that, I just want to highlight that I regularly have BDD and SpecFlow related courses. The next one is going to be just next Monday. So if you can really make a quick decision and would like to come next week to my courses, definitely contact me. You see my email address there, and I'm happy to give you a 20% coupon for the course next week. But you can see my other course options in the URL that you see on the page.